All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining the CPUC Surge webinar on what is Assembly Bill 2143, Public Utilities Code Section 769.2, and how to stay in compliance. Just to go over a quick disclaimer slide, this presentation will go over a summary of AB 2143 and PUC 769.2. During this workshop, we will focus on general information, how to stay compliant, and frequently asked questions that our team has received. We want to emphasize that this workshop will not cover how to determine prevailing wages and preparing certified payroll records. You can visit the Department of Industrial Relations, the DIR website, for more information. Finally, this presentation is for informational purposes and may be subject to change based on legislation or regulatory requirements. Please refer to official sources from CPUC or contact Surge for the most up-to-date information. Thank you. Here are the workshop ground rules. This webinar is being recorded and will be available to you all. We will also send out the slides and post all of this information on our website. Mics will be muted throughout the presentation. Please use the Q&A for questions. These will be addressed at the end of the presentation. And finally, please be respectful of other participants and presenters as we are all here to share and learn information together. This is our Surge support team. We have Sylvia Lin, who is our Surge project manager, Ariana Fernandez, our senior trainer, Christina Salcedo, our senior outreach coordinator, and Grace Turney, our outreach coordinator, and myself, Brittany Amagata, senior outreach coordinator. We also have Amber Murakami Fester on the call with us, and she is the CPUC representative for this project or for this program. So what is Surge? Surge stands for the Solar Utilities Reporting, Guidance, and Education Initiative. It is directed and developed by the California Public Utilities Commission to help contractors navigate compliance requirements for AB 2143 and PUC 769.2. Here are some important resources and information we would like to share with you all. For information on Surge, please visit our website at www.cpucsurge.org. This is where you can get access to all of the information that will be useful to contractors with projects subject to AB 2143. We highly encourage everyone on this call to take a look at the website and read through the content as it may answer questions you may have. If you need support, you can also reach out to us via email at info@cpucsurge.org or our hotline at 1-800-549-2143. And finally, contractors must submit digital copies of certified payroll records to the CPUC through the Surge Compliance Portal, which is accessible through our website. In this presentation, we will go into further detail on how to stay compliant. Now I'm going to pass it on to Amber Murakami Fester, who is our CPUC project manager.
All right, thanks, Brittany. So to reintroduce myself, I'm Amber Murakami Fester. I'm with the Public Utilities Commission. We've been working with the Surge team here for about a year and a half now, and they've been doing a great job of putting everything together here today. So I will really quickly go through what AB 2143 and PUC 769.2 are. So AB 2143, that stands for Assembly Bill 2143. It essentially added section 769.2 into the Public Utilities Code. So that's what PUC stands for here. For the purposes of this presentation, you might see them kind of being used interchangeably. So hopefully that's not too confusing. The bill essentially ensures construction workers and apprentices involved in qualified customer-sided renewable electrical generation facilities are paid prevailing wages. So renewable electrical generation facilities generally will refer to solar and solar with storage, but just as a technicality, it does also include other types of renewable electrical generation facilities like wind or small-scale hydro if you are working on those types of projects. And so you might want to be aware of that as well. The bill has been effective starting January 1st, 2024. So projects moving forward will have to comply, provided that they are qualified and not don't fall under any of the exemptions. And then a few key points to mention about the bill too. So any renewable energy generation facility and any associated battery storage that seeks to use the contract or tariffs pursuant to PUC 2827.1 will constitute as public works. So it's essentially saying that all the accompanying requirements that come with being a public works project also will apply, hence the requirement to pay workers prevailing wages. And let's see, so the PUC 2827.1 tariffs include the net energy metering and net billing tariffs. These might also be called the solar billing plan, depending on your IOU. But this is really the qualifier for whether or not a project will apply to AB 2143. So if your project is interconnecting under NEM or NBT, you'll definitely want to pay attention to prevailing wage rules. So the surge team will go into a lot more of the details here. So I'll hand it back over to Christina, I think. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Amber. So let's jump into the requirements under AB 2143 or PUC 769.2. It's important to note here that these apply to all contractors, whether you're a prime contractor or a lower tiered sub. If you are working on an eligible renewable energy project, then you must meet the requirements that we see. So the first one, contractors are required to pay construction workers and apprentices prevailing wages. Contractors also must maintain and verify certified payroll records through the California Department of Industrial Relations, or the DIR. And then contractors are also required to submit digital copies of certified payroll records to the Commission twice a year on July 1st and on December 31st of each year. And so we heard Brittany mention the Surge Compliance Portal. That is where contractors would submit those copies. We can jump to the next slide. And so AB 2143 PU 769.2, we also have some eligibility exceptions here. So the following projects do not apply. The first would be residential facilities with a maximum generating capacity of 15 kilowatts. So that's the key number there, 15 or less, or installed on a single family home. We also have projects that are already classified as a public work under existing law. If they are public works projects, then they are already subject to prevailing wage requirements. And then we have facilities serving only a modular home community, or multi-unit housing with 2 or fewer stories. So now that we've gone over AB 2143, the exceptions, the requirements, I'm going to hand it over to Ariana, who's going to touch on how to stay compliant.
Thanks, Christina. Welcome, everyone. My name's Ariana. I'm going to take you through the next few slides here. So we can go ahead and move on to the next slide. Okay, so with these AB 2143 projects, the first step ideally would be for the contractors to complete their interconnection application with the IOUs, which are the investor-owned utilities. Next, since these projects are deemed public works under this bill, all of the existing public works requirements do apply. So you would need to follow all of the DIR regulations and all of the requirements that are already codified into the labor code. The next step would be for contractors to register with Surge as a contractor, register your project with Surge. Just the prime contractor needs to register the project. And then the last step would be to report your payrolls to DIR and to Surge. Okay, so step one, starting with the interconnection application. So the investor-owned utilities are Pacific Gas and Electric, Southern California Edison, and San Diego Gas and Electric. So when you apply for these interconnections in their portals, now they have their prevailing wage checklist, which will include a copy of those exemptions that Christina just went over. So if you answer no to all of those questions in their applications, that means your project does not fall under the exemptions, and AB 2143 would apply. Then the investor-owned utilities have also added what's called the prevailing wage disclosure form, which we will go through shortly. It is important to note, and something that we have been seeing a lot and hearing, is that there could be a third party, such as a consultant or something, that is completing these interconnection applications. In which case, that party would just need to ensure that the contractors are aware of these, requirements in this bill, and make sure that they're submitting certified payrolls through Surge and DIR. And next slide. All right, so this is just kind of an example of what the prevailing wage disclosure form looks like. So be sure to read through this. It does detail the requirements, and essentially when you're signing this, you are stating that you will pay the workers prevailing wages. So be sure to read this thoroughly before signing. All right, so after the interconnections, the next step would be to follow the DIR regulations for awarding bodies and public works contractors. So we'll just start with awarding bodies. These could also be known as the project owners. This entity is responsible for registering the project with the DIR. So in Surge, the prime contractor will do the project registration. In DIR, the awarding body or the project owner will do the project registration. And then once DIR approves the project in their system, they will issue the DIR project ID number, which the awarding body should share that with all of the contractors and subcontractors, because they'll need that in order to submit payrolls to the DIR. And then for public works contractors, DIR responsibilities, you have to register as a public works contractor, pay the prevailing wages for your craft or classification that you're using, follow the apprenticeship requirements, and then maintain and submit your certified payroll reports. Okay, moving on to Surge requirements. So in the Surge portal, all contractors and subcontractors are required to register. You'll have to create your free submittable account first in order to do so. That's the platform that our compliance portal is hosted on. This only needs to be done one time in the portal. And then once we approve your registration, we're just going to check to make sure you have a valid contractor license number and DIR Public Works contractor registration number. And then once we approve it, you will be issued your contractor identification number through Surge. So this is what we refer to as the SIN number. And you will need to keep track of this because you'll need it to register for your projects if you're a prime, and then you'll need it when you submit the certified payroll reports. All right, so after the contractor registration, the next step in the Surge portal is to register your project with Surge. So this is the responsibility of the prime contractor. Awarding bodies don't need to register in our system. Subcontractors don't need to register projects. This is a prime contractor responsibility. Each eligible project should be registered separately. And then we will also ask the questionnaire with those exemptions from the bill. So if you, again, answer no to all of those questions, that means none of the exemptions apply, and AB 2143 does apply to your project. So once we approve your project, you will be issued your project identification number, or the PIN. And again, the primes will need to share this PIN with all of their subcontractors because they'll need that when they're going to upload their certified payroll reports. And next slide. Okay, so step 5 is to report payrolls to DIR and Surge. So in DIR's system, these are called the eCPRs, which is Electronic Certified Payroll Reports. These are required on a monthly basis by DIR, so you need to make sure that you're keeping up with that and submitting monthly throughout your project. We have a link here to the DIR Certified Payroll Reporting System if needed, but you can also access that directly through their website. And then we just wanted to put a little clarification here. The eCPRs are a separate and distinct requirement from maintaining certified payroll reports. So I know this can be a little bit confusing, but in Surge, we don't actually need your eCPRs uploaded. If you want to attach them to your regular certified payroll reports, that would be fine. But they don't really show all of the information that a regular certified payroll report does. Mostly they're missing the employee's address and social, and that is because the DIR's database is a public database. So they do that to protect worker information. So in Surge, there's a biannual deadline to submit, which is July 1st and December 31st of each year. We do encourage you to submit more frequently. You can submit at any time in our portal. So we kind of encourage you, if it's easier for you to stay on track with the monthly submissions, that way you can do DIR and Surge at the same time. And then we need a copy of your regular original certified payroll report. So I'll get into that on the next slide, please. Okay, so certified payroll records are defined in the Labor Code under Section 1776. They must be certified, which means they have to be accompanied by a signed statement of compliance. So this document, you're signing this under penalty of perjury that you have paid the correct wages and you're reporting everything true and correct to the best of your knowledge. We do recommend that contractors review these labor codes and the Public Works Manual. There is a section that really goes into good detail about certified payroll records. So in the Public Works Manual, we've linked it here for you. It's section 3.1.1. And then in Surge for your certified payrolls, we recommend using the DIR's A-1 131 form. I do understand, and I've been hearing from contractors that the top line of their form is corrupted. So you can either just go on to the second line or you can handwrite it in. I think it doesn't allow you to fill in the total hours, but either one of those would be fine. And then you just need to upload a PDF into our system. So just make sure it contains all the required information under 1776, which would be the name, address, and social of the employees. We can accept the last four of their social, that's fine. It should show their work classification, their straight time and overtime hours, their hourly rates of pay, etc. And then in order to make it certified, again, it has to be accompanied by that statement of compliance. And next slide. Okay, so non-performing payrolls. So a non-performing week refers to a week on the project where you might not have performed any work. So let's say you started at the beginning of 1 month and then maybe you had, 3 or 4 weeks where there was no work being performed on the job, maybe due to material or weather delays or something like that. So in order to keep the payrolls in continuous order, we would require a statement of non-performance. So it's just essentially you're just going to certify that no work was performed on the project. Because if we don't receive these, and this goes for DIR system as well, it just looks like payrolls might be missing. So it is important to submit the non-performing payrolls. We do have a blank template for a statement of non-performance that we can share, or you can simply use the A1 131 form and just write no work performed. You would just need to still sign that statement of compliance at the back. All right, so in summary, if you perform work on one of these AB 2143 projects, you are required to pay the prevailing wages, maintain and submit certified payroll reports to both DIR and Surge. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Sylvia to take us through the next few slides.
Thank you, Ariana. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. We are glad to see that we have such a great turnout, and thank you so much for participating. So with that, let's get started. So what we're going to look at here are a series of questions that we receive on a regular basis. So as you can imagine, with Assembly Bill 2143 being in effect now for over a year, we've heard a lot of questions from the contractors, from consultants. So we have quite a library collected at this point. So one of the more frequent is, I'm new to the DIR Public Works DIR requirements. How do I get started? Well, One of the ways that you can always get started is to educate yourself and become familiar with the different DIR requirements. You can do that through the Surge website. As Christina and Ariana were saying, we have a multitude of resources on our website, and it includes different DIR webinars. You can also go to the DIR Support Center. They do have a very robust reference library of everything from webinars that they have recorded and that they continually update. So you would be sure to get the most frequent information. In terms of getting started, once you're actually performing a task, let's say you've gone through, you've familiarized yourself with the requirements, contractors need to register as a contractor. So that's something that you can learn from the different support links that we're showing here. But again, please take advantage of the training. And it's as Ariana was describing the Surge process, it's a step-by-step process that goes in chronological sequence. So once you get that down for your first project, I think it'll be easier on the subsequent projects. And next slide, please. All right, so I have a commercial project under 15 kilowatts. Is this subject to AB 2143? And as you heard earlier in our presentation here today, 15 kilowatts is the magic number that we need to be looking for. However, it's not all commercial projects. These are residential projects under 15 kilowatts. So keep in mind that a residential project, that can be a multifamily unit. It can be a adult care facility. It can be a child care facility. Anything that qualifies as a residential facility. So that follows that 15 kilowatt or less would make you would put you out of the AB 2143 requirements. Again, not subject to single family homes. So again, the exception only applies to residential facilities, does not apply to residential facilities with a generating capacity. So again, keywords, generating capacity 15 or less, or a single family home. So in other words, you could have a single family home that's maybe 20, 30 kilowatts or more. That's not going to be subject regardless of the number of kilowatts. So keep that in mind. Next question, please. All right, my project is private, and is it subject to AB 2143? Keep in mind that the projects you are working on in this solar arena here, these are all privately funded projects. You as the contractor are entering into a contract with the property owner, project owner, and it's private funds. I want to quickly explain what distinguishes privately funded here, public works, versus when we talk about, is it a public works project under the AB 2143 exemption, is what it's talking about within that exemption under public works. Is it funded by public dollars? Are there state grants, federal grants that are paying for this construction? So when we call this a public works project, it's subject to public works requirements, but under the private funding. So again, if it's privately owned or funded, when we say it may be subject to AB 2143, there may be other exemption rules at play here. So we want to make sure that we have all of the information before we just summarily say, it's excluded, included, whatever. So keep that in mind. Again, AB 2143 applies to privately funded projects that involve the installation of the solar panels and or batteries. That's pursuant to the language of the regulation. So it's also the battery and as well as the solar panels. So as we've gone through a couple of times here today, unless the project falls within one of those three eligibility exemptions, it is most likely subject to AB 2143. Again, given that most of the significant events occurred on or after January 1st, 2024. And projects that fall under AB 2143 are considered, again, public works projects. And when we think about the term public works in this context, that means it follows all of the requirements, prevailing wage, apprentice requirements, everything that goes with public works. And you're going to be required to conform with all those public works regulations, again, including prevailing wage, apprenticeship, anything under the labor code as enforced by the DIR. So, that's a lot of times a contractor will start the question, but my project is privately funded. Well, these solar projects under AB 2143, they're all privately funded for the most part. And next slide, please. So what is defined as the public works projects under AB 2143? So this is pursuant to AB 2143 and the labor code. So public works here in this case, falling under the labor code, has to abide by all of the labor code provisions, again, with respect to paying prevailing wage, apprentice, making sure that all the proper forms are submitted, that a contractor is properly registered under both the DIR, in fact, under the DIR. So you need to be registered as a contractor with the DIR. So pursuant to the terms of the governing labor code provisions. And for additional text on public works projects outside of these AB 2143, PUC 769.2, we've given you a link here to 720 of the labor code. So, we often get the question here, what is the governing authority in terms of why I have to follow these requirements? So we always want to make sure to provide you with those labor code resources. So if you don't see the language specifically in AB 2143 and it refers you to the labor compliance regulations, that's what it's talking about. So the DIR, they enforce these labor code requirements. So in some cases, you may see, for example, California Code of Regulations or something, or labor code. Again, this is what sets forth those standards for apprentice requirements and everything that we're talking about here today. So it is grounded in regulation. So which, it's not, it doesn't, it's very standardized and very consistent in its application. Next question, please. So other potential exemptions to AB 2143. So we talked about the 3 that are actually in the language of AB 2143. However, there are some others. And what we encounter a lot of is contractors who maybe had a project that was completed in 2023 or before and have an interconnection application on or before December 31st. Now, the reason these would qualify you for an exemption for that project is AB 2143 wasn't in effect in 2023, and it wasn't taken into consideration and factored into labor costs when you signed the contract for the construction work, and all of the other significant transactions that occurred at that point. So what we're looking for is, as we go through and whether or not it qualifies under one of these exemptions as it having occurred before 2024, is do you have information that verifies that? We need to know what was the project start date, the completion, the interconnection application start date. So again, anything that started in 2023 or earlier and completed or ongoing in 2024 with an interconnection application that was approved in 2023, that's going to be exempted most likely. Projects completed again, 2023 with an interconnection filed with the IOU in 2023, but if it's still pending in 2024, let's say due to some technical error, and that we encounter that sometimes. Maybe there was some type of mistake on that interconnection application or something that had to be further clarified, but that it was filed, it was acknowledged by one of the IOUs at that point, but there just they need to clarify something. Something needs to be corrected. But if most of that was put into play, that the process started in 2023, most likely going to qualify for an exemption with the proper verification documentation. Last bullet, project contract executed and work started in 2023, but the work carried over into 2024. With the interconnection application subsequently submitted in 2024. Again, with the proper documentation, and we want to see the extent to which there was project work in 2024, how close was that project executed, that contract executed in 2023? You know, for example, if it was executed on December 31st of 2023, but it, you know, most of the work is going to be done in 2024, that's going to be borderline. We're going to want to take a closer look on that at that particular scenario. But take these into consideration in addition to the 3 exemptions, that if you have work, and we've seen it going back as far as 2022 in some cases, where there have been just some technical challenges either with the project or with the application process. And if you provide the proper documentation, in large part, it's going to be exempted. So, you know, just work with us. Give us the information that is being requested, documentation, and you just may be granted that exemption. And next slide, please. And so we were just talking about with the proper verifiable evidence that most of this occurred in 2023. So here's examples of what the surge team will be requesting. So a final approved inspection building permit. So obviously we're going to want to see something that is signed, executed in 2023. An affidavit attesting contract execution and the project started in 2023. And in addition to the affidavit, because an affidavit can be drafted and signed with the dates when maybe that really doesn't represent the activity in the timeline. So we'll want to see a copy of the executed contract. Certainly you can redact any personal information. We understand you want to keep that private, protect the integrity of it, and any other documentation that identifies the project details. And, you know, that's the key here. Provide as much information as possible to show that all of this occurred in 2023 or a significant portion. So evidence must include proof that the inspections, the required inspections, are final at that point, all the proper signatures, not an unexecuted document, and that the clearances have been approved. So something to keep in mind as you collect all of that information, and as you describe what the scenario, what that entails. And next slide, please. And does the DIR, actually one of our slides here, I'm going to have to move my screen, apply to surge and AB 2143 reporting. So the DIR website notifies users of a temporary pause. What this goes back to is the DIR had a upgrade to their platform back in June of 2024. And part of the issue that they're having is with contractor registrations, some project registrations, and uploading the eCPRs. So what they've done is they've notified contractors, users who go onto their system, that there is a temporary pause to submit the eCPRs while they work out some of the kinks with their platform. So what this is doing is saying, if you are unable to submit, and the submission is kind of hit and miss at this point. Some people are reporting that they're able to submit and getting through, others are not, but it is sporadic. So the DIR's temporary pause, it doesn't apply to surge, first off. So again, they are 2 separate platforms, 2 separate processes. You'll still need to upload to surge, even if you cannot upload to the DIR. And you'll be able to pretty much do anything in surge, and that includes submitting the completed registrations, uploading copies of your certified payroll, and to do that by the deadline. So even though the DIR, and I just want to qualify the DIR, just because they put a pause on it doesn't mean you won't at some point have to submit it. You're just given a pause in that if you cannot. However, you may continue with all aspects of Surge, even if the DIR website is completely down. There are a different set of deadlines as described earlier in the presentation. The deadline for DIR submitting payrolls is monthly under Surge and AB 2143. It's biannually, so it's July and December. You can still comply with all of the Surge requirements without having to upload to the DIR. So you can do that separately. So that's a very important factor to keep in mind. In fact, we often encourage, as soon as you know you're going to be embarking upon a solar project at some point that may be subject to AB 2143, go onto the Surge website, familiarize yourself, educate yourself with the program, and register as a contractor. You don't even have to have an active project at that point to be able to go in and register as a contractor. So it's really going to benefit you to be proactive in this process, and in the long run save you some time and be compliant. And next slide. And what are the Surge payroll submission deadlines? So when we're talking about our deadlines, which are biannually, contractors and subcontractors must provide their certified payroll at least biannually. Now, this is the key. If you feel this is a more manageable process and easier to go through, if you follow the same schedule as when you submit to the DIR, you can do it monthly. You are not required to stay with that biannual. That is the minimum will be July 1st and December 31st. If you wish to submit monthly or every other month or whenever you've collected those payrolls, you are more than welcome. In fact, you are encouraged to do that. And on our website, make sure that you consult with that website frequently, because for each reporting cycle, we always put reminders up to show when those payrolls are due and when those deadlines are approaching. And next slide, please. And what if I don't submit my certified payrolls to Surge? Well, like with any regulatory requirement, there is a penalty that is associated with it. So failure to submit certified payroll records in Surge may result in a loss of the net metering tariff for the property owner. So keep that in mind, because it does not just affect the contractor, but the property owner as well stands to lose their tariff, the benefit. It may prevent interconnection applications from proceeding. So you may have an interconnection application placed on hold that prevents you as the contractor from applying for new projects. We've heard that a little bit more this last go round with the latest deadline, that maybe a prior project was out of compliance. Now you're trying to get a new one started, but it's been placed on hold. And that is because the payrolls were not submitted in a timely manner for maybe a previous project. So it's always a good idea to stay on top of that. And ensure timely submission to avoid the disruptions. That way you can easily transition from one, you can close out one project in a timely manner and move on to the next. So keep in mind when you are behind on these payroll submissions, what the repercussions may be. And the next slide, please. And with that, I am going to turn it back over to Brittany.
Thank you, Sylvia, so much.
You're welcome.
And also thank you everyone again for taking the time to join us for this workshop. Here are some information, our resources, and how to contact us. Please visit the Surge website if you would like to learn more and view resources and information for contractors subject to AB 2143. You can contact us via email and also on our hotline at 1-800-549-2143. For notifications for events like these, or other informations that we share, you can follow us on LinkedIn. We also post all of our videos, video resources for contractors on our YouTube. And then the next slide, we do have an upcoming webinar with the Department of Industrial Relations on April 16th. So you can go ahead. It is available to register now on our CPUC Surge website under the Happenings tab. And this is where they would go into a deep dive of like the prevailing wages and preparing your certified payroll records. So this will be next month. So please register so that you can secure your spot today. And then now I'm going to turn it over to Christina, who will start with the questions that we received during the presentation. All right.
Great, thanks, Brittany. A reminder that if you do have a question, we do encourage that you drop it into the Q&A feature. If your question does require you to elaborate and we need to unmute you, then we can do so then when we address your question. So I am going to go ahead and get started. I'm just going to go down the list here and kind of read some of these questions out loud, and someone from the Surge team can reply. So the first question, all of our projects are commercial and are public works under previously existing law. We submit reports on registered projects to the DIR. As I understand it, we are not required to report to Surge or to register the project as they are done under DIR. Is this correct?
I can take that one, Christina. Yes, it is. If you have a public works project that is publicly funded, you're receiving money from the state and or the federal government, and it follows all of the public works requirements, you are not required to submit your information to Surge and the DIR. That is strictly a public works, publicly funded project, only the DIR, and then whatever federal requirements would apply.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, next question. If contractor A was hired by the building owner and then hired me, does that make contractor A the prime contractor responsible for project registration with the DIR or Surge?
I can go ahead and take that one. So the prime contractor is defined as the entity that has the contract directly with the project owner. So yes, it does appear in that scenario. If you were hired directly by the owner and your contract was with them directly, then you would be considered the prime contractor for that project. And then in Surge, you as the prime would register your project, but in the DIR, the awarding body or the project owner would register the project. So there is a slight difference there.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, next question. It was stated that the CPRs are uploaded twice a year, July and December. Are we and our contractors able to upload the CPRs weekly or monthly as they would do on the DIR?
I can go ahead and take this one as well. And yes, you can upload into Surge at any time after your certified payroll reports are ready. We do encourage more frequent uploads. Like we encourage contractors to upload monthly into Surge just to stay on track with the DIR submissions.
Thank you, Ariana. Next question. Is the building owner the prime contractor or another entity responsible for registering the project with the DIR?
I can go ahead and take this one again. In the DIR system, the project owner or the awarding body is responsible for registering the project. In Surge, it is the prime contractor's responsibility.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next question. Does AB 2143 only apply to projects who have an interconnection agreement that started after January 1st, 2024?
I can take that one. As a general rule, yes, but as was discussed in the timing exemptions, that where we said possibly you may have an exemption based on when the application was filed, when the project started. It's, as a general rule, yes, it would be 2024 in terms of the interconnection application and the timing of that, the filing of that application, and when really those events are put into motion.
Awesome, thank you. Another question here. We're having a lot of project delays due to private business owners attempting to register as an awarding body with the DIR, and the DIR not approving them as an awarding body. Can we move forward with the project and register on Surge while we wait for the DIR, or do we have to wait?
I can take this one.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, we can both jump in as needed. So you do not need to wait for DIR to move forward with your Surge submissions. Our portal is totally separate. The DIR, if they're having issues, that shouldn't hold up your submissions on Surge. We have heard this scenario quite a bit where the private business owners are trying to register, as an awarding body with DIR. And what we've heard from our contact at DIR is that typically an awarding body in the state of California would have a .gov email address because it's a public entity, and so those are automatically approved in their system. So any type of email that does not have that format, that .gov, requires them to manually go in and approve. So that's kind of what we're seeing as the holdup. So what they recommended is you can email them for email verification. They did say to please specify and let them know that this is an AB 2143 project so that they are aware. They also gave some other guidance that you can add AB 2143 into the project name. Like if your project was named Jim Solar Project, you could put -AB 2143, and that will trigger them to understand that this is an AB 2143 project, and it might not have the typical awarding body email address. Did you want to add anything to that, Sylvia?
No, I believe that covers it. Thank you, Ariana.
Just one more thing on that too. They also said that you can create an email address, like just a general Gmail one, and add AB 2143 into that name, and that will help them, recognize that this is an AB 2143 and they need to manually approve that. So if you are having issues like that, reach out to us and we can provide you with some guidance, but just know that you can reach out to DIR for verification. Just be sure to always specify this is AB 2143.
Awesome, thank you both. Okay, next question. What do we do if the owner does not want to get the DIR project number?
You want to take this one, Sylvia, or you want me to?
I can go ahead and get it started. Yeah, that is a common question that we receive. Without the project owner registering for the project, the contractor and the subs will not be able to submit their payroll reports. And that is going to result in penalties imposed by the DIR. So, you'll want to the best of your ability as a contractor, please explain what the requirements are, what the ramifications of not registering the project are. And in that case, now, Grant, as Ariana just explained, this is a DIR requirement that the property owner, project owner, steps into the shoes of the awarding body. This is specifically the language of the DIR. So we really can't speak to how those circumstances will be handled in terms of the owner failing to do it, but probably the best thing to do as a contractor, reach out to the DIR and explain the circumstances and let them provide guidance, whether it be that they recommend that the contractor register, whatever their response is, that response needs to come from the DIR. So using that format that Ariana just described, if you're reaching out to the DIR as the prime contractor, please make sure to let them know you are writing to them, calling them in reference to AB 2143. So they will make sure to, prioritize, and that they have the background when they go to answer your question as to what it concerns.
And then just adding on to that, it is required under the labor code for the project owners to do this. So you could also share the labor code with them. I believe you can search on DIR's website. And then you can also let them know that this is just a one-time requirement. So it's just at the beginning of the project and then they're done. So essentially all you go in is you enter, it's just a data entry process after you create the account, but you'll enter, the project name, a description, the contract amount and things like that. And then they're done that's their only responsibility for the project.
And along the same lines, part of the DIR's resource library, they do have a very short, brief, step-by-step reference guide that will instruct the owner how to enter the information, what screens to look for. So there is a lot of help available on the DIR's website for that project owner who's maybe not accustomed to doing this.
Awesome. Thank you both. Another question. I thought Liberty Electric was also an IOU. Are projects in this utility exempt?
As a general rule, the territory-owned utilities it's only the IOUs that are going to be subject to this. We understand there are a lot of territory utility companies out there, and not familiar with all of them. I'm not sure about Liberty, but if they are not considered an IOU, and they're not going to likely be issuing that NEM tariff, so therefore the project is going to be outside of AB 2143. Amber, I didn't know as the CPUC if you wanted to weigh in on that at all.
Yeah, yes. So Liberty is considered a small IOU. So it's not one of the large IOUs that were mentioned. So that's PG&E, SDG&E, SCE. So right now the small IOUs are not, the projects in those smaller IOU territories are not required to comply with AB 2143 as we understand it. So hope that helps.
Thank you, Amber.
All
Thank
right,
you.
Christina, before you continue, I just wanted to mention to everybody, we have about 7 minutes left in this call, and we're still receiving a ton of questions coming, and we're seeing them come through quickly. We're probably not going to get through all of them, but we will be answering all of them in a separate Q&A document that we will send probably by next week. So that it can get us so that we can, answer all of your questions that you have and that you have it all noted down. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody knows that we see your questions, we will answer them, and then we will send those responses out to you all. Okay, Christina.
Awesome. Thanks, Brittany. Okay, this question, similar to one we saw before, a little bit different. Does this rule apply to projects where the interconnection agreement started before January 2024?
And again, as a general rule, no. We're going to look for, if the circumstances show that there was a lot of carryover in activity to 2024, but the interconnection application was filed, and in 2023, we're going to look for information like, where was it in the process in terms of the IOUs? Is it going to come over into 2024 if it was filed in 2023, and for what reason? So we're going to look for some additional information, especially if it's close to that 2023, 2024 date. Again, it depends on the circumstances, but general rule, applications filed for and especially approved by the IOU in 2023 are not going to be subject to AB 2143.
Awesome. Thank you. Another question, do we submit certified payroll reports to the DIR in Surge?
Yes.
And then, can we have more than one employee on our company Surge account, or will we have to use one login for access to our Surge projects?
I can take this one. This
Okay.
is a good question. I believe you can only have one person registered in Surge because it only asks for one email. And all of our correspondence will be going to that email. So if you have multiple team members, I would recommend creating a group email that they all have access to and then using that to register in Surge. Because all of our important correspondence will be going through that portal and it will go to that one email. So if that person's no longer with your company or something like that, that could be an issue. So again, if you have multiple team members that need to be updated, I would recommend creating a group email of some sort.
Okay, thank you. Another question, I have tried to register a project on Surge and it is stating invalid interconnectivity number, but it is the correct number. What do I do?
Well, typically what will happen is if we cannot not locate the interconnection number that you provided for the project registration in the IOU database, whether that be SCE, PG&E, SDG&E, then we're going to, the first thing we're going to ask you to do is exactly what the question suggests here. I know it's the right number. I verified it. It is the correct number. So we're going to look into why is it not yet showing up in the database that the Surge team has access to? So we may ask you to provide a copy of your interconnection application, because oftentimes it tells us maybe you're exempt from AB 2143, and that's why it's not appearing in the database. So at that point, we're going to request additional information. Again, first step, confirm that that's the right number. We're also going to look, where is that project in the process? Where is that interconnection application in the process? Sometimes we'll get a project registration where the interconnection application was filed for maybe that morning or in less than 24 hours, and it just hasn't updated in the system yet. It just doesn't show up in the system. So we're going to give it a day, then we'll check again. And a lot of times we do see it in the subsequent days or even a week. If it's still not there and it's been a considerable amount of time, then the next thing we're going to do is ask you for a copy of your interconnection application, and then we'll work with you to see if anything can be if we can diagnose it from that. And we may have to have you go back and consult with the IOU representative that you were working with. So it triggers the need for additional documentation. But most of the time we were able to resolve what that is.
Yeah, and then just adding on to that, like Sylvia said, a lot of the times it might just be a timing issue. Maybe we just need to wait a day or two until it's available in the portal. But another thing that we've seen a lot, and we recommend that contractors do, is to go back and review that prevailing wage checklist that's in the application. Because again, they're going to ask the exemptions, which are, is your project already an existing or already a public work under existing law? Is this a residential facility under 15 kW, et cetera, et cetera? So what we've seen is sometimes the contractors might inadvertently answer yes to one of those questions, which would then make your project exempt, and then that application would not be available to us. We only have access to the projects that are 100% subject to AB 2143. So if that happens to you, that would be my first step to recommend to you, would be go back and review that prevailing wage checklist. If that's not the problem, then again, we'll need to do some, deeper diving into there, but that will be reviewed on a case-by-case basis.
And I would just like to emphasize here on something Ariana just covered too, is that exemption that states, is this a public works project? Because that can be very confusing, because AB 2143 makes it a public works project. So we are seeing a lot of people answering yes to that because they're reading, they're interpreting the language of AB 2143 that says it's a public works project. What that exemption refers to is it a public works project outside of AB 2143, meaning does it already have state and or federal funds? In that case, it would be exempt from AB 2143. So make sure if it's not a publicly funded project that you answer no to that question.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. We are at our 1:30 mark, so that would cue to the end of our presentation. We understand there are a number of questions that have not been answered, but like Brittany mentioned, we will be releasing a Q&A doc where we will be addressing all of your questions. If you have registered for this event, you will also be receiving the presentation and the Q&A doc via email as well. We appreciate you hopping on and joining us today. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us at info@cpucsurge.org or give us a call at 1-800-549-2143. Thanks so much, Ariana.
I do have one quick thing to add. Sorry to cut you off, Christina,
No
but
problem.
I am seeing a lot of, questions coming through, and I do encourage you to go on to our website and review the FAQs that are already published, because a lot of these questions have already been asked and answered by DIR. So make sure you review. We have everything under the FAQ tab, and we have a lot of information under the education tab. So lots of helpful resources already there for contractors as we, work through this list and get a current document out.
Great
Yes,
reminder. Thanks, Ariana.
Yeah, thank you. And for those of you who maybe are looking for those older Q&A documents, they would be under the education tab, like Ariana mentioned. Go to our presentations tab, and then you'll see our old presentations and those documents there. So again, thank you all so much. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Good
you.
one.
Bye-bye.